Good afternoon to you. It's 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Margot Cleveland from the Federalist joins us this hour. We'll talk about some of the very important but lesser-known details from that Robert Hur report last week. Margot Cleveland certainly has her eyes open. We'll talk to her about that. And Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch joins us coming up. Judicial Watch just out with some new reporting today that Alejandro Mayorkas personally denied Secret Service protection for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Remember, there have been many threats to RFK Jr. as he tries to run for president. The left is worried he's taken a bunch of votes away from Biden. Mayorkas not granting Secret Service protection, despite all the problems there. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I've been asking about this man for years. Tony Bobulinski, when will he testify before Congress? Biden family business partner who has alleged that Joe Biden was absolutely a part of the family business, and he has all the evidence to support it. That finally took place today. Tony Bobulinski testifying this morning before the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, also the Committee on the Judiciary inside of the House of Representatives. Here to talk about that is Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona, who's on those committees. Sir, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Good to be with you.
And Tony Bobulinski finally making his appearance today. What did you take away from that?
So I think he's credible. The things he said track with other things that we found out from various witnesses, including people like Devin Archer and Rob Walker, who were Hunter Biden's business partners. But the bottom line for me is he talked about the first time he met Joe Biden, and it was because he was putting together the CEFC deal with Hunter and associates to get millions of dollars in to this new company called Sinohawk. Anyways, without getting into the details, I would just tell you it was pretty compelling stuff in my mind, and the opposite is true with the Democrats. So the Democrats spend all their time trying to cast him as a liar. So one of the things, for instance, they were talking about, when did you get that COVID-19 test? The FBI report says you got it when you went to the White House. And he says, I've never been to the White House. And so they try to get him and paint him to be a liar, but he's not. He's telling the truth because everything he said tracks with other evidence that we have.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm going to quote a little bit from his opening statement because I thought it was about as clear as it gets. The left has insisted that there is no evidence of Joe Biden's involvement in the business. But here's what Bobulinski said today. The only reason any of these international business transactions took place, with tens of millions of dollars flowing directly to the Biden family, was because Joe Biden was in high office. The Biden family business was Joe Biden, period. Other key players have made this point clear as well. Hunter Biden himself has adamantly stated it in a variety of communications, as did another Biden family business associate, Devin Archer, in his testimony last year. Foreign nationals on the other side of these transactions, including from China, Ukraine, and Romania, have also explained how and why these transactions took place. Once again, I would call that extensive evidence. So he seems to be making a pretty intentional effort here today, Congressman Biggs, to say, despite what you're hearing from the press, that's a lie. There is a mountain of evidence pointing to the corruption of this family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Tony Bobulinski has ticked off that the media has been protecting Joe Biden and attacking him.
Yes.
And he believes this. He says, I'm just telling the truth the way I know it. He talked about, like I say, that meeting in L.A. I believe it was at the Peninsula in Beverly Hills. So they were at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills, and they were talking. And basically, he comes in, they have a casual conversation, but the only reason that he gets to meet Joe Biden is because he's helping Hunter put together that family business deal that's going to put millions of dollars into the pot of the Biden family business, the Biden family corruption pot. That's it.
And his motivations are, I think, there are multiple motivations as I understand it. One of them is he said, look, I'm a patriot. I've served my country, and I want people to know about this for patriotic reasons. Got it. But there's also a personal issue here, which is that he feels that he was defrauded by the Bidens, that he was left high and dry in these relationships, and now he's like, you know what? They screwed me. I'm here to tell the truth now about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, yes, because he did mention that he felt defrauded, and I think the fraud comes into the Biden family made representations of what they were going to do. They did nothing, but they sure sucked off a whole lot of money, and left nothing to people like Bobulinski, who actually were going to do perhaps I think he was going to do legitimate work.
Yes.
So I mean, the whole thing smells so bad, and he talks about how he warned people. He asked Jim Biden how this worked, and Jim Biden, you know what Jim Biden said is he says, what happens if Joe Biden runs for office and you guys get bad press because you guys are cutting a deal in the family with China? Jim Biden's response was plausible deniability. Plausible deniability.
Plausible. So that came up again today. That's one of the most staggering lines in his testimony through the years, now under oath before Congress, saying this. Also, 10% for the big guy. You have, in the past, Bobulinski has said publicly 1,000% he knows that Joe Biden was the big guy, although Rob Walker, another Biden family business partner, last month testified before your committee as well, and he all of a sudden is pulling the "I have no idea who the big guy is" routine. What did you figure out between their testimonies?
Well, I mean, Devin Archer basically also admitted that Joe Biden was the big guy. He's the big guy. He was their product. They all of them, even Rob Walker admits Joe Biden's the product. And Joe Biden was the big guy. He was getting a cut here. He knew what was going on, and so it gives light to the whole thing of Joe Biden. Initially, when he's running, says, you know, I never had any information about my son's business, number one. Number two, nobody in our family ever took any money from China. Both of those big fat whoppers.
Give us an update. There's a lot more to talk about with Rob Walker, and I'll address some of it coming up on the show. I know your time is limited. I do want to ask also, you know, Bobulinski had said in the past that he had a long conversation once with the FBI and then never heard from them again. What can you tell us about that?
So, and that's where they're going after him. They're saying that it was his report is inconsistent with what he's testified to or said publicly. He gave a lengthy interview. He asked for a copy of the transcript. When they finally got it, they determined that there was a lot that was inaccurate, that he felt was inaccurate and not with what he said. And his attorney tried to get it cleared up and cleaned up, but some of the stuff remains. I mean, so it should be easy for the Democrats to verify whether he got a COVID test at the White House. My guess is he didn't. He said he didn't. And why do I believe him? Because he said the day before he was in Nashville and he met President Trump. During COVID, I met with President Trump on a number of occasions. You always had to have a COVID test before you met with President Trump. And they were in Nashville. They were not at the White House. So the FBI agents got it flat out wrong. And the logs would also show he never went to the White House, which is consistent with his story.
Right. And yet, and then after he reports all of this wrongdoing, this corruption on the part of the Biden family, not any interest whatsoever from the federal government in following up with him.
Yeah. No, not at all. Not at all. And this is consistent with Hunter Biden. You know, like with the laptop, they basically tried to wipe that out and create a narrative that it was all Russian disinformation, wasn't real, blah,
yes.
blah, blah. It's consistent, Vince, with the weaponization of our police apparatus for political purposes. Make no mistake, this was for political purposes.
It's gross. All right, Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you for digging in, for sharing what you learned today. Appreciate your time as always, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks, Vince.
All right, that's Congressman Andy Biggs, a busy man on both the House Judiciary and Oversight committees, giving us a sense of some of that Tony Bobulinski testimony today. I look forward to reading the full transcript of that testimony, I assume, in the weeks to come. Meanwhile, the committees did release the transcript of Rob Walker's testimony from just a few weeks ago. Now, if you were to look back at the headlines after Rob Walker testified, and this was across all of the news outlets, I'm just going to quote from Axios because they were one of them. They had a headline, Hunter Biden associate says president never involved in business dealings. That's what it was 2 weeks ago when he gave that testimony, the media instantly ran with a headline saying that Rob Walker was telling people in this closed-door deposition that Biden had no involvement in the family's business dealings. In fact, they even quote from Walker in his opening statement. Here's what he said. To be clear, President Biden, while in office or as a private citizen, was never involved in any of the business activities we pursued. Any statement to the contrary is simply false, is what Walker apparently said. But here's the deal. The deposition was released today. The actual testimony released today. And in it, we now see that Walker admitted to the committees that Biden did meet with Chinese officials who were paying the Biden family. So first of all, Walker's testimony itself is schizophrenic. It's all over the place. It says Biden was never involved, and then when he's asked about, wait a second, wasn't Joe at these meetings with these officials that the Bidens were being enriched by? Yes, he was. Well, then how can you say he was never involved? Here's how the exchange goes. James Lynch over at National Review writing about this. Headline, Joe Biden met with Chinese energy firm chairman around the time of $3 million payment to Hunter's business partner. Quote, did Joe Biden ever attend any location or meeting or place where CEFC officials were also there? A staffer asked Walker. Yes, Walker replied. He recalled the meeting took place in Washington, D.C., and Joe Biden, who had just left office as vice president, stopped by for lunch. Quote, I don't know the exact, it was 2017 at some point, but I don't know exactly when, Walker said. The meeting took place at a Four Seasons hotel in a private room. CEFC chairman Yi Jianming and other associates were present at the meeting. Walker testified the following, quote, I don't know if Zhang was there, but I believe that Yi was there. I'm certain of it, he said. He did not know who the other CEFC associates were at the meeting. Walker firmly recalled that Jianming and his translator, Hunter, as well as Hunter Biden, business associate James Gillier, and Joe Biden attended the meeting. They were all there. So that's very different from Biden was never involved in the business dealings. Well, other than when he had meetings with the people who were paying the Bidens $3 million. Important note here, CEFC was very much identified as being completely compromised by the Communist Party in China, well known to Biden by that point. This is controlled by the Chinese government, and here he is taking their money. In fact, Margot Cleveland did a deep dive on this testimony today, and she'll be joining us coming up at 4:30 to talk a little bit about a whole bunch of things. But among them, I want to talk to her about Rob Walker's testimony. But it really is all over the place. She says that there's a lot of inconsistencies in his remarks. Again, 2 weeks ago, it was a 2-hour-plus interview. They confronted House investigators and confronted Walker with a statement that he made to an FBI agent in December of 2020. Do you remember the day of action that was planned after the 2020 election? The FBI planned a, quote, day of action to go after everybody in the Biden orbit all at the same time. It was scheduled for December 8th. And guess who got tipped off December 7th to that happening? That's right, Hunter Biden. His Secret Service agents were contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware. Hey, just so you know, we've got a big surprise investigation coming tomorrow. Everyone's going to get questioned. So everybody gets tipped off. And so on December 8th, you'll recall IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley said all of the witnesses, every single person across the country that they wanted to interview, they all clammed up except for one person who apparently didn't get the memo, Rob Walker. Rob Walker was the one. And so the FBI agents get to Walker and they start asking him about the Biden family's business arrangements. Walker gave the FBI very different answers from the squirrely ones he just gave Congress 2 weeks ago. Looking forward to our conversation. But before we get there, just want to point out something that she noticed. You know, when Rob Walker, the Hunter Biden family business partner, talked to the FBI in December of 2020, he apparently was surprised by their visit, and he coughed up more information than he probably should have, given the corrupt scheme that he was a part of. During that interview, the FBI agent asked Walker whether Joe Biden had ever shown up at any meetings with CEFC, the Chinese communist-connected energy company that Hunter and his partners were soliciting for business that paid Walker's company $3 million in March of 2017. Walker later gave Hunter Biden more than $1 million of that money. After telling the agents that Joe Biden had come to the Four Seasons to greet members of the CEFC delegation in early 2017, The FBI agent asked Walker if there were, quote, any times when he was in office, or did you hear Hunter say that he was setting up a meeting with his dad, with them, while dad was still in office? Walker responded, yeah. Well, how about that? So he set up meetings with Joe while Joe was still vice president? That's what Walker told the FBI at the time. Now, while Walker confirmed in that 2020 interview that Hunter had said he was setting up a meeting with his dad and CEFC representatives, Walker changed his story during last month's House questioning. Quote, I would like to point out that this was, I believe, being recorded on a device that I didn't know about, Walker said. I certainly don't recall Hunter setting up a meeting with his dad. The House investigator asked Walker to explain what he was referring to when he said, yeah. Walker's attorney quickly interjected, if you know. Walker then dutifully responded, I don't know. Interesting. You know what's interesting about this, in addition to the conflicting stories? One of them involved telling the FBI a story. Now, if you lie to the FBI, we know how that goes, right? That's a crime to lie to the FBI. The other was testimony before the United States Congress. And if you lie to Congress, you know what happens? Well, that's a crime. He's told two different stories to two different investigative bodies under penalty of perjury. One group he's not telling the truth to. We'll explore that with Margot Cleveland. Also, we're going to get into the details of this Robert Hur report. It's not just that Joe Biden's brain doesn't work. It's also that Hunter Biden appears to have had access to very important classified intelligence. Margot pulls it all together. That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch will join us at the top of the hour. We've got some breaking news there involving Mayorkas's petty corruption against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Also, we'll get into what's going on with Donald Trump, his immunity appeal, fighting against Jack Smith, and whether Big Fat Fanny's going to be smacked off the case in Georgia. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot has been said now, including right here, about Robert Hur's report last week indicating that Joe Biden is not all there. But there's something else that's super interesting inside those hundreds of pages about the classified documents that Biden had stolen and was apparently also disseminating. For more on that topic, I want to bring in Margot Cleveland. She's a senior legal correspondent at the Federalist and has been just the absolute best at digging into this very question. Margot, good to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, Margot, we've talked about, like I said, the part where he says, Biden couldn't remember the date of his son's death or when he was vice president. But there was some very interesting information about these classified documents that Biden took. What did we find?
So it's very interesting because in the appendix, they listed all of the documents that were classified, top secret, confidential. And if you started to thumb through those, what you discovered was there was a very clear overlap between the documents that Biden had taken and the different types of activities that Hunter Biden was engaged in.
Right. So when we think about places like Ukraine and China and Romania, you're starting to be able to color some of that in because you're seeing the documents inside of the Hur report?
You are, and you're seeing timing match up pretty well, too. So what I did is I took a look at what the appendix said for what the documents were, what the dates were, and then I pulled up Devin Archer's transcript and walked through that, and you could really see the same times and the same places coming up. So, for instance, with Burisma, you would see that was starting, I think it was in 2014, they were actually starting to work with Burisma. And 2014, wow, look what you have. You have some memos that were kept that Hunter Biden had. And I think probably the closest overlap that was really telling was from December of 2015. And your listeners will probably remember that was when Hunter Biden and Devin Archer were over in Europe, and it was after a Burisma board meeting when the Burisma owner and one of the top guys there were very desperate and in panic about the investigation into Burisma and wanted Hunter to call D.C. And as Devin Archer said, that meant Dad. And they actually made a call to Dad, and that was shortly before Joe Biden's trip to Ukraine, where he then threatened to keep the money back unless the prosecutor was fired. And what we saw here was that there were notes that Joe Biden had, including a transcript of a call he made with the Prime Minister after that infamous visit with the threat, as well as a note to his admin saying, hey, I want you to get me a copy of this transcript, this conversation. And all this time, Biden kept it. So you can really see the overlap between what Joe Biden was doing in the office and what Hunter Biden was doing in the pay-to-play scandal.
Mm-hmm. You know, I remember at one point during this whole saga, an email came out from, I believe it was from Hunter Biden's laptop, that demonstrated some sort of knowledge that Hunter Biden had about the Ukrainian energy market. It was an unusual email. The language of it was written as if he was an expert energy market analyst. And there was some belief that that was actually informed by U.S. intelligence or some sort of documents that Hunter had access to. Because, again, Hunter, it was never the obvious thing, and even Hunter himself has admitted, is that he was hired because of his last name, because of his family, never because of any meaningful expertise that he had. Do you get the impression from the Hur report that Hunter was informed by some sort of classified document that before he sent that email?
Sure. So from the Hur report, you don't get an inclination whether or not Hunter had access to it, but you do get the inclination that Joe had no problem giving access to people. He gave it to his ghostwriter. He kept this stuff in his garage, in boxes in his house. And that's what I think is key here, is that it wasn't so much that he had these documents and that maybe those are the ones that Hunter saw. It reaffirmed that everything that Joe was doing as vice president was exactly what Hunter was doing. And Joe wasn't careful about what he did with the documents. And we know that Joe sent all these emails to Hunter. And we know, as you mentioned, there was that email, and I want to say it was in maybe April or May, but it was a very detailed email, and I actually had it mentioned somewhere in my article. And what I think would be fascinating, I'm actually surprised no one's done this yet who has access to this, is to actually compare that document to the briefings that were done around that time frame. Because Joe Biden had all these briefings. He had notebooks in which he was keeping notes from this. It really would not be that hard to figure out if any of that language mirrored what was being told to Joe Biden.
Yes. Yeah, and you make an excellent point. You point to, like, his recklessness with information, his casual disregard for classification laws, his long history of lying about his involvement and his knowledge of his family's business arrangements. At this point, he does not deserve the benefit of the doubt in any meaningful way. In fact, if anything, you should approach this with the perspective of thinking that Joe is guilty as sin as you start digging in on each of these things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just saw it. It was an April 13th, 2014 email, and that came 1 week before Biden was to travel to Ukraine. And what does that tell you? If Joe Biden's about to be going to Ukraine, he's getting briefings. He's getting updates on all of this. And Hunter then went on and elaborated on 22 points about their political situation. He didn't know any of this stuff. It's just ridiculous to think that he did research that involved anything than, asking the big guy, hey, what can you tell me about Ukraine? Or, what can you share with me? And if he was going to share it with his biographer, why would he not share it with his son, who he was doing everything he could to help?
Yeah, it's a fascinating detail. Now, you mentioned also that, because he's sharing this with his ghostwriter information, Joe Biden's defense of this last week when he tried to mount one was, that wasn't classified intelligence that I shared with the ghostwriter. I'll tell you what I shared with him. And then he went on to say that What he shared was a memo that he had drafted, a multi-page memo, the Vice President of the United States sent to the President of the United States, detailing what their strategy should be in our number one foreign conflict, Afghanistan. Now, Margot, I don't know. I've never had a clearance to be able to see classified information, but my sense is from the outside that if the Vice President writes to the President a memo related to our number one foreign policy conflict, it is by definition classified.
I would think so, but really we don't need to even figure it out ourselves because the special counsel said that he had shared classified information. And the only reason Biden was not being charged was because the special counsel did not think that a jury would convict him because of his mental defects, deficits, that he didn't have the memory. And this is something I think is really key for people to keep in mind. We're not talking about when Joe Biden was interviewed by the special counsel. He was very clear that the recordings of Joe Biden's conversations with his ghostwriter showed in 2017 that he was having these types of mental problems and memory problems. That is huge to me. And I'm
sorry, will you go over that detail in a more explicit way? Because my impression has been through all of this that he had trouble when he was talking to the special counsel about remembering various dates. But there are some specifics related to talking to the ghostwriter?
Yes. It was actually in the report. And the special counsel said that the problems were both, and I think he used the language, significant memory problems. And it was both at the time that he was interviewed by the special counsel, but earlier. In fact, I just pulled up the language. It was that her conclusion was that the president suffered from, quote, significantly limited memory, and that's close quotes, and it said as early as 2017. That was when he was being interviewed by his ghostwriter. And if you think about how dementia progresses, it can take very long time, and people who don't know people well or don't spend time might not notice it, and then somebody else comes in and like, oh my gosh, this guy just can't keep, he can't have this conversation, he can't keep going on it. That's why I said I actually posted a tweet on this saying, okay, you know what? Let's get those recordings. If Biden's saying that this is a bunch of malarkey, let's see those recordings that made the special counsel say we're not going to charge him, and it went back to 2017. And here, it sounds like you're going to have Judicial Watch on later today. The head guy over there, he made an awesome point in a tweet. He said, look, we had the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, approve this special counsel report. So Merrick Garland had no problem with this report concluding they're not going to charge Joe Biden because of his mental incapacity. Well, who is in the cabinet? Merrick Garland. If Merrick Garland's going to say, okay, I buy that report, then Merrick Garland, as a member of the cabinet, should be trying to invoke the 25th Amendment. He can't have it both ways. We say that Biden can't have it both ways. He's either should be charged with a crime or he's mentally incompetent. Well, Merrick Garland is the one who has the ability to do something. He approved the report, so that should also mean that he's ready to move forward because our commander-in-chief can't stay in that position.
Yeah, it's such an excellent point. Of course, it's not going to be a barrier in the end for the Biden administration. They say things like the border is secure when it's not, so they're not exactly that worried about the details. But you're right; it is an important indicator. And for all of these special counsel reports, which unfortunately we've become so familiar with over these last few years, it is up to the Attorney General whether they see the light of day. And certainly, this report does see the light of day with the blessing and endorsement of Merrick Garland.
Yep. Absolutely, and it's just appalling where we have come as a country. We see this from this special counsel report, but as the news breaking today that we have the Durham special counsel report, and we still don't know the end of the story because now we have Michael Scheltenberger and Matt Taibbi breaking news that it was a hit job job on basically Donald Trump and the intelligence community getting the five eyes over in England spying on Donald Trump. So it's just a mess what is going on in our country right now.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, this is one of these things that escaped my notice today. Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi have a joint report today on what exactly?
They do. That they have sources who said that the CIA asked the foreign allies to spy on and follow and try to get in touch with several individuals. I think it was like 22 working for the Trump campaign. It's a huge story that just broke a couple hours ago. So, and what did Durham's report have on this? Nothing. So,
this, by the way, so the headline on their reporting, and this strikes me as totally plausible too, because we've seen this play out a bunch of different ways. Headline: CIA had foreign allies spy on Trump team, triggering Russia collusion hoax. Sources say. This is common practice for these corrupt deep state officials, Margot Cleveland, which is to use an end around the Constitution. They have other institutions do their dirty work, whether it's censoring the American people by way of the big tech companies or spying on Americans using foreign or intelligence surveillance tools by incidentally spying on them. But you can tailor these surveillance requests specifically to actually spy on an American citizen while pretending you're not. So this is unfortunately become a common and corrupt practice.
It is, and sorry to throw that at you, but like I said, it just recently broke, and it ties in with everything that we're talking about, where we're having special counsel after special counsel after special counsel, and nothing is happening. It's outrageous. Totally
outrageous. Well, God bless the people who dig in like you. Margot Cleveland, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Vince.
That's Margot Cleveland over at the Federalist. Always excellent. And look, she shouldn't apologize at all for bringing this to my attention, because this is the business we're in. Breaking news here, and trying to dig these stories up. Schellenberger and Taibbi, for sure, and they're also shared on the byline today by a guy called Alex Gutentag. They are Schellenberger and Taibbi in particular. I don't know Alex as well. Have just been great. They've just been so great and so fearless. They've gone before Congress. They've testified. You've got Democrats who've been looking to destroy them at all costs because the amount of truth that they're telling about our government. They're living up to the best standards of journalism. They have been these last few years. And this is why the First Amendment exists the way it does, why there are protections for journalists. And here you have these guys reporting now today on some more information they have on how our own government's CIA, and there's a picture of John Brennan looking like a ghoul at the top of this story, dedicating itself to destroying an American political candidate, Donald Trump, and using foreign allies to spy on him. This is that is, just imagine, just the basic details of that. That is a scandal of epic proportions. Epic proportions. And of course, it'll receive fizzling, if not outright, just absolutely cast by the side attention by the mainstream American news media today. Some more information from that report today. Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Alex Gutentag reporting. CIA had foreign allies spy on Trump team, triggering the Russia collusion hoax, sources say. They point to last year's John Durham report coming out, concluding the FBI should have never opened its investigation into alleged collusion by Trump. Now, multiple credible sources tell Public and Racket, that's the name of their Substack, that the United States intelligence community, including the CIA, illegally mobilized foreign intelligence agencies to target Trump advisors long before the summer of 2016. They say until now, the official story has been the FBI's investigation began after Australian intel officials told U.S. officials that a Trump aide had boasted to a diplomat that Russia had damning material about Hillary Clinton. In truth, the intelligence community here in America asked the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance to surveil Trump's associates and share the intel they acquired with U.S. agencies, say sources close to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. This is a huge scandal. And just add it to the pile of all of the abuses of our government and its power against the American people over these past few years, pushed by Hillary Clinton and her demented, deranged anti-American campaign. Holy cow. Tom Fitton is joining us just minutes from now. We're going to talk to him about the weaponization of that very government against Donald Trump now in 2024. Stay with us.